This is Virgo, written by Deanne Leo, narrated by Catherine Edwards.
Chapter 1. Antarctica breathed. He didn't. He loved the sight of blood pooling on the snow. The deep red enticed his appetite, while the contrast of the white snow added a kick. Life, death, heaven, hell. He smiled and waited. His adrenaline was like a snake slithering through his system. Although his fangs had descended and the blood in his vein was surging up in waves, he wanted to keep it slow, as if a slow death would make the blood of his prey taste better. He stared at the dying pulse of the prey. What's the guy's name? He couldn't quite remember. Some scientist. He looked up at a stretch of ice, shining in the reflection of the light from a research station. He loved the magnificence of Antarctica. As he watched, the last pulse had stopped, bent down to enjoy the feast. Still warm blood, the most delicious kind. He kneeled on the ice and absorbed the chill. The warmth of blood and the chill of ice mixed together, sending him into ecstasy. As soon as he finished, he looked up at the stretch of shiny ice again. A shadow walked past him. A familiar scent engulfed him. A scent of death. His own true death. He stood up and turned around, looking at the vampire who had just arrived. "How many times have I said you are not to feed on humans around here?" the other vampire asked. The exotically throaty voice purred through the icy air, the whisper of death. "But their blood is a lot tastier than humans elsewhere." "In 7 days I couldn't care less what you would want to do. But before that, I am not pleased to see my order disrespected." He opened his mouth and was about to say something, but no word came out. His throat was ripped off. Blood spurted, pumping out in great streams. He slumped to the ice. "Why?" he whispered as he felt his life drain. "Why what?" "Why you work for a human?" The other vampire crouched. "He pays well." "It's not the money. It's..." That was all he could say before feeling his body spun in the air and smashed down onto the snow again. With so much blood lost, he was going to die away. He wasn't going down that easily. The other vampire pulled out a stake, brandished it, and thrust the stake at him. He grabbed the stake and broke it in two before it was able to pierce his chest. He used the broken end and slashed at the vampire who was executing him. He kept slashing even when the world started to fade around him. He wasn't sure he touched the other vampire. Maybe not. A silver dagger punched through his heart. He looked down and saw his body disintegrating into pieces of black blood and gore. This was the end of more than 100 years being undead. "This is all because I fed on a human?" "No, it's because you fed where and when you shouldn't. It's because you disobeyed my order. There was only one creature who can disobey me, and you're not him." The vampire pulled the dagger out and stabbed at him again. That was the last thing he saw in this very long, unnatural life. Chapter 2. Madeline gasped at the trail of blood she saw running down the mirror. She darted over to wipe the blood off, but it had vanished before her eyes. "Precognition sucks," she muttered. She barely had it, but once she did, it would be quite accurate. She rushed to the wing next door and saw her beautiful twins sleeping peacefully in their secured cabin. The security shield was on and intact. Even if this universe crumbled, this cabin would still be there, and her children would still be living inside it. Security was the most important issue for her in new days. This universe was too far from Earth for her to get any help should anything happen to her children. She left the bedroom wing and scurried into the internal capsule, an egg-shaped moving vehicle the size of a minibus.
"Good morning, First Counselor. Where would you like to go?"
A robotic voice came across with an exotic accent, a weird combination of British, South African, Australian, and maybe Babylonian. That was a robotic voice experiment her husband had created to confuse her, she thought. Ciaran, her beloved husband, had a wicked sense of humor. She had asked him to put her New York accent into the computer system, but he disagreed. He said the robot was to serve her and to look at her from his perspective. Thus they were not to speak like her. "Control room," she said. The capsule zoomed out of their internal station so smoothly that she wasn't aware of the movement. In a heartbeat, she was in front of the control room. The gigantic steel door slid open when she approached. There was no need for her to verify with the security. Ciaran had ensured she felt at home as much as possible. Madeline smiled to herself. Ciaran would never understand that a year ago, home for her was a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan, New York, which couldn't, in any shape or form, compare to his lavish mansion in Henley-on-the-Thames, England. She wondered if the staff they placed there had been doing a good job in maintaining the place. She loved that place. She and Ciaran had so many good memories there. She pretended to forget the bad ones. She rushed to the round control room in which computer screens were like wallpaper. At a gigantic workstation on a raised platform, Ciaran swung his chair around and stood up. He smiled at her, and she had forgotten what she had came for. Her husband stood in front of her, making her stomach quiver uncontrollably with lust. An elegant 6'3" body with all the muscles at the right places. Raven black hair that almost touched his shoulders. Intense, smoky gray eyes that always pried the truth out of anyone at his pleasure. And the face of a dark angel the god had created when he was in the mood to pardon all sins on earth. "Good morning, First Counselor," he said. "You didn't come home last night." She pasted a pretend scowl on her face. He approached. "I'm home," he whispered, and kissed the dimple on her left cheek. "I meant the bedroom," she said, with a voice muffled by his lips, which had migrated from her dimple to her mouth. "I'll make it up to you," he said, his hand starting to get really busy somewhere on her body. Then her psychic mind clicked, and she started to read his mind. Damn it! She cursed out loud and stopped the kiss. Her talent was like a curse, and it mostly kicked in at very inconvenient occasions. She saw dark corners in his mind, dark thoughts that loomed over everything. They were consuming him. He tucked a strand of stray hair behind his ear. "You knew. That's why you came here?" She shook her head. "I had a vision. An old friend of mine was dead. Blood was everywhere. I don't know why and how. Then the blood trailed on my hand and appeared on the bedroom window. I don't know what it meant." He held her hands, his eyes filled with compassion. "There have been so many deaths, including your loved ones, before we came here. Very few of them that you saw. Now you saw this one. This person must be a very special friend." She lifted a shoulder, trying to keep a neutral expression. "I was writing a periodic column about Latin American politics. It was the early days in my career. We dated briefly." Ciaran cocked an eyebrow. Damn! He was giving her that "you're not telling me everything" look. "All right," she said, looking up through her lashes. "We got kinda intimate." He folded his arms on his chest and looked at her. Now it was Ciaran's usual corporate boardroom unfathomable look that she was dealing with, and whenever that happened, she lost. All right. He was my first serious boyfriend." She could feel blood rush to her face. She hated when she blushed. Ciaran laughed. "There now." He pulled her into his arms and embraced her. "I'm glad you weren't a nun before we got married. How long was the intimacy with your first serious boyfriend?" "Will you believe me if I say it was a one-night stand?" "No, because you're not a one-night stand type." "All right, it was 6 months. Are you jealous, Ciaran?" He smiled. No, I'm not jealous of the past because I can't fix it. What I am getting at here, Madeline, is that I'm afraid that your precognition has something to do with the now. With me. Is that why the dark thoughts are looming in your mind right now? She asked. He sat back in a chair at his computer station. His eyes were so dark it stabbed at her heart. Maybe. I can't see the connection yet. But your precognition is always triggered when something is going to happen to me or the kids. I have to make a trip back to Earth. She approached, leaning against his desk. Well, since we've moved to this wonderful universe, you've made several trips back to Earth. What's the difference this time? She asked, while playing with his thick black hair. I have never been to the location. It's a cross-dimension between Earth and a paranormal world. It could be tricky. Where exactly on Earth? She raised an eyebrow. Antarctica. He shook his head and repeated. The magnificent Antarctica. It's a continent, Ciaran. I know, but the paranormal world crosses the entire Antarctica. It's one of the most notorious territories of vampires. Madeline narrowed her eyes. And we don't have any of that kind on staff? Even if the vampires are causing trouble there, surely you can send commanders rather than going yourself. If anything happens to you, who will take care of billions of your citizens? Ciaran ran a hand through her hair and tucked a strand behind her ear. Vampires are a small issue. It's Hoyt that I'm worried about. Hoyt Flanagan? I thought we can't have intelligence in Zealock. Ciaran shook his head. No, but we do everywhere else. Hoyt's sent people back to Earth to search for 6 keys across different dimensions. The first key is Virgo. It's hidden in the Antarctica now. If he obtains all 6 keys, he will unlock a powerful source of energy that we don't have access to. Not only will he take over our days, other universes will be in trouble too. And the multiverse will be in chaos, Madeline whispered. But you're the king of days, Ciaran. We can't afford anything to happen to you. It's Hoyt we're dealing with, Madeline. I can't send our commanders in to get killed. Plus, sending people there will leave their stations vulnerable. If it turns out to be a decoy, then we just open our door to Hoyt. It won't take me long to figure out which is which. I can retrieve the first key, then send people to retrieve other keys. Madeline nodded, knowing that what Ciaran suggested made sense. Hoyt used to be a sorcerer on Earth, but had worked his way up to the most dangerous creature in the cosmos. He operated at Ciaran's caliber, so there was no point for her to suggest any strategy to deal with him. Hoyt had worked for more than 500 years toward the power of days, including killing and destroying lives of thousands of humans and creatures. But Ciaran had turned his dream into dust. Now Hoyt was plotting to be the ruler of Zealock, the land of multiversal outlaws, and he might get it this time. That universe was ungoverned by any creature, but it was guarded by the most mysterious and powerful force that even Ciaran couldn't understand. If Hoyt got to the power in Zealock, he would become invincible. This is a mission that has direct impact on the survival of days. It's the one that a king should personally handle, Ciaran said. Madeline smiled. She wasn't surprised at all by his response. That was her husband, her king. He hadn't changed a bit since she fell in love with him. It didn't matter if they lived on Earth or in days. It didn't matter if they were humans or Udasian. He was her Ciaran, and he was always the same. I know you are the best, Ciaran, but you don't have psychic ability like I do. When you have to navigate around that big lump of ice, you will need me. I can't take you. It's dangerous. I'm your first counselor. Also, it would only be a fraction of days' time when we come back here. Ciaran contemplated. Madeline asked, Do you have any other information? apart from knowing the key is somewhere in that continent? Because it might take a while to search. It's in a research station. I don't know which one, and whether it is an active station. Her eyes widened as she whispered a name. Antonio. Which one? Ciaran asked, and turned around toward his computer to enter a search command. Antonio Castro is the friend I just had the precognition about. He's a journalist. But from memory, his sister is a researcher at a station in Antarctica. My prediction. An Argentine station. Ciaran grinned. Damn! Her stomach quivered again. Chapter 3. Peter pushed the door into a small office of the research chief, Adam Rodriguez. The chief looked up, arching an eyebrow. The small office wasn't enough room for a large man like Peter to steam and pace back and forth, so Peter stayed on the one spot. Frustration oozed out of his every pore. "We found Luke," Peter said. "I know. That's why I'm calling the base, before I was rudely interrupted." "The base? Your base, you mean? What is that supposed to mean?" Adam slammed the phone handle down. Peter gritted his teeth. "We never had a base. You think I don't know? When I went back home last month, I looked it up. This station never existed. It isn't real." "Yet you came back here. Is that because the money in your bank account is real?" Adam leaned back in his chair. "I figured this might be an illegal station. I was fine with it. I work for money, and I'm not killing anyone. But I am not going to die for this job." "Why would you say that?" "Did you see Luke's body?" Peter asked, his eyes wide with a memory. "He has puncture marks on his neck, and he has no blood in him." "You're suggesting he was killed by a vampire?" Peter waved his arms in the air. "What else could cause such an injury? A seal? I didn't know seals sucked blood out of people." "You have scientific evidence to prove that vampires suck blood out of people, don't you, Peter? Or have you been reading too many fantasy novels? For God's sakes, you're a scientist." "I want to go home. I don't care. I want to leave. You pay me the last check, and I'm out of here." "I'm not the one who pays you, Peter," Adam said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I can call the base about your resignation. I can certainly put in a more legit reason than fear of vampire attacks, so that you can get a reference and a job elsewhere." Peter looked down. "All right. Thank you. You're a good boss, Adam." Adam waved his hand absently, signaling Peter to get out of his office. "Seriously? It didn't concern you when you saw the fang marks on Luke's neck?" Adam shifted in his chair. "I've seen stranger things here during my time, Peter, but this one is only a crude joke. A warning from a rival station." "Jesus Christ, a human life isn't a crude joke, Adam." Adam peeled his glasses off his face and put them on his desk. He rubbed at his temples. "It is for those we are dealing with. This is a ghost station. Ghost means it isn't on official records. Not a spirit of some dead person. The station serves the interests of very powerful individuals. You and I are living in their pockets." "They placed us here for the minerals," Peter challenged. "They want to steal minerals that legally belong to governments." "I'm glad you come to your senses. It's all about money. A passive amount of money. And of course there are unaccountable numbers of people and ghost stations here fighting for it. Now if you'll excuse me, I'll call the base to see what they'd want to do about Luke." Peter nodded and turned around to leave the office. Then he stopped when his eyes landed on the corner of a small bookshelf. Then he stepped backward toward the door. "What's that, Peter?" Adam turned around and looked in the direction where Peter was staring. On the bookshelf was a small, clear bottle of red liquid. It was blood in the bottle. Peter was sure of it. Adam stood up. "It's not mine," he said. Peter stumbled on a chair and broke the leg in the process. He picked up the broken chair leg and pointed the sharp end at Adam.
Jesus Christ, you think I'm a vampire, Peter?
Adam walked around his desk.
Don't move. Don't approach me, or I'll stake you,
Peter said. He knew vampires were fast. There was no way he'd turn his back and run. He stepped back toward the door.
Peter! Don't move. I'm serious. I'll stake you.
With his last threat, he felt a blast of cold air blowing at his back. A chill ran up his spine. Soft, cold fingers grabbed his neck, and pain flared as pointy objects penetrated the vein on his neck. He knew his jugular was savaged. By the look on Adam's face, Peter could tell Adam had found concrete evidence of the existence of paranormal creatures. Chapter 4. Buenos Aires, the capital city of Argentina, was busy. The least conspicuous way Ciaran could make their arrival was to teleport there during the night to the outskirts of the city. Once they landed, he and Madeline would turn their silver blood off and become ordinary humans. Silver blood, or Yudki, was a special energy source that gave them supernatural power, and they could choose to use the power or not. It ran inside their body in a form of semi-transparent, silvery liquid. But the power came with weaknesses. The silver blood only ran in a particular spot on their body, and it was unique to the individual. If they were using the power and got injured where the silver blood leaked, it would certainly be fatal. If they didn't use the power and were injured, they could turn the power on and it would heal the injury. They would never die as a human if they were careful enough. That was one of the perks of having the silver blood. Early in the morning, they strode along a suburban street. Ciaran cautiously glanced around. He couldn't afford to miss any sign of trouble. He had arranged 2 ordinary guns for himself and Madeline. They had their laser guns with them, but he wasn't sure if they worked on Earth when they operated the gun as humans. He'd hoped that they didn't have to use a weapon here, but fighting with Hoyt over such important matters, not only blood, but lives would be lost. Perhaps he should focus on minimizing the damage rather than stopping it from happening. It must be the weekend, as people looked more casual, and there was a festive spirit in the air. A small market was being set up. Cheerful Latin American music hovered somewhere in the air.
"Antonio's place is at the other end of the market,"
Madeline said. Ciaran nodded and scanned the area. The market got crowded quickly. People poured out on the street as if they'd been staying awake all night to wait for the market. Ciaran didn't care for it when he and Madeline were pushed along with a sea of people. A boy of about 11 fell over onto the road in front of Ciaran and Madeline. A man charged after the boy and slapped his hand on the boy's head. The man let out a stream of Spanish that Ciaran didn't need to speak the language to know it was abusive. But he did speak a bit of Spanish. He helped the boy up and pushed him behind Madeline. "What's the problem?" Ciaran asked the man in Spanish.
"He picked my pocket,"
the man steamed. Ciaran cocked an eyebrow and looked at the boy. The boy shrugged and pulled out a wallet. When he gave the wallet back to the man raised his hand, wanting to slap at the boy again. But he quickly ducked back behind Ciaran. The man sized Ciaran up and down, then he appeared to come to his senses and walked away. Ciaran crouched. "What's your name?"
"Michael Martina,"
the boy said cautiously. Ciaran smiled. "Next time, don't get caught, Michael."
"Ciaran,"
Madeline exclaimed,
"you're encouraging him to pick pockets."
"Should I say go to school? What if he doesn't like school?" Ciaran winked at Madeline.
"No, school bores me. I have gifts for you,"
Michael said in English, and put on a wicked smile. He pulled out 2 wallets. One was Ciaran's, and the other was Madeline's. He looked at Ciaran.
"You're British."
Then he turned toward Madeline.
"And you're American."
"I see. Not only did you pick our pockets without getting caught, you've read our IDs, too." Madeline smiled, in spite of herself, incredulous. "See, my wife is very understanding," Ciaran said, and got some money out of his wallet, which by his gauge the boy didn't take any.
"Take this money. Buy some decent clothes. Eat some decent food. And if you like it, I think you should go to school."
I don't need to. My father teaches me. He used to be a teacher. He doesn't have a job anymore, though.
Michael looked down, playing with the hem of his worn-out jacket. Then he looked up, glanced around, and looked back at Ciaran.
I never get caught when I pick pockets. I just wanted to see if you'd help me.
"Is that right?"
Ciaran chuckled. Testing people this way was what he usually did to people. It was pleasant when he was at the receiving end. When he passed the test by doing the right thing, of course.
You're both in trouble,
Michael said. His voice lowered and he glanced around again.
What sort of trouble? And how do you know?
Madeline asked.
I got the wallet early this morning before dawn from a man. I saw a sketch of you both in an order to kill you. The sketch was in red ink, but now I think about it, it might be blood.
Where is it? In the wallet. It must have information about the man you took the wallet from.
Michael shook his head, and for the first time since they'd met, he looked a bit nervous.
It melted in my hand. First the sketch, and then the wallet.
It was clear he didn't think the adults would believe him.
"Look out!"
Ciaran shouted to Madeline and pulled Michael behind him. He had spotted shadows of creatures that moved in incredible speed. The speed that human eyes wouldn't capture. Vampire speed. And the reason he could spot that was because he hadn't turned his silver blood off, as he had asked Madeline to. Two shadows approached him. They slid between dimensions, dropping in and out of human conscious awareness. They couldn't tell if Ciaran had his silver blood on or not. He stood still, and they came close with fangs bared. He swiveled and switched dimensions, pulling his laser gun out, and put 2 lethal beams to the heads of the creatures. He swiveled back into the human current dimension. The crowd and everyone around them were oblivious to what just happened. He looked at Madeline. She knew what he'd just done, and she wasn't happy. Well, he'd make it up to her later. Michael snapped back to reality as if he'd just fallen asleep. He shook his head. He looked at Ciaran and Madeline with his blurry eyes.
I just wanted to let you know about the sketch, and now you know. Stay safe. I have to go let others know.
"Others? How many?"
Ciaran asked.
It was a long list, but these are the people I know. That's why I remember.
"Let us know if we can help,"
Ciaran said. Michael considered it for a moment and conceded.
All right,
he said.
The other one is Uncle Antonio. He lives at the other side of the market.
Antonio Castro?
Madeline asked.
Yes,
Michael responded, surprised.
"He's on the blood list of the vampires,"
Ciaran muttered. Chapter 5. Madeline and Ciaran followed Michael toward the other end of the market. The wind carried in the great gust of icy rain, making the walk unpleasant. A small suburban house stood quietly, lonely, and isolated compared to the atmosphere of the market around it. It was how Madeline remembered Antonio, cool-headed and quite aloof. They pushed at the door and stormed in. Antonio was lying on the floor. A vampire crouched next to him, preparing to feed on the prey. Ciaran said nothing and pulled his double guns with silver bullets he had made for this particular trip. The vampire shot up and switched dimensions. Ciaran pursued in a heartbeat.
They both disappeared,
Michael said in astonishment.
No, Michael, they just ran really fast,
Madeline said. She checked on Antonio. There were no fang marks on his neck.
Antonio,
she called and shook his shoulders. In a short moment his eyes fluttered and opened.
"Madeline,"
he said from the ground.
Yes, long time no see. How are you feeling?
She smiled and helped him up. Antonio glanced around, still dazed.
"Where's the man?"
He knocked you out and ran away.
Michael said.
I saw your name and picture on a list written in blood this morning. Madeline's picture was on it too.
Blood list. Are you okay?
Antonio exclaimed and reached his hand out protectively to touch Madeline's shoulder. Madeline felt the hilt of Ciaran's dagger slide in between her shoulder and Antonio's hand. She turned around and saw that Ciaran had come back, standing behind her.
"This is Ciaran, my husband,"
Madeline said. Antonio grunted out a greeting. The two men conducted the normal greeting gestures that she could humanly refer to as handshaking, but it felt as if they were pulling their teeth out.
Are you bitten?
Ciaran asked. Antonio snorted.
The man might look a bit like a vampire, but he was certainly not a zombie. I wouldn't worry about being bitten.
You should. He doesn't look like a vampire. He is one. Or at least he used to be.
Ciaran deadpanned. You got him? Madeline asked. Ciaran nodded.
Before he alerted his entire network of our whereabouts, I think he's one of their assassins.
Then he looked at Antonio.
If he wanted to kill you, you would have been dead by now. Vampires use fangs for many purposes, not just to suck blood. You might have something he wanted, Mr. Castro, and he might have pried the information out of you already, using a little seductive venom on his fangs.
Michael winced. An expression of disgust crossed his face.
Michael, would you mind keeping an eye on the front yard? Make sure no one enters when we talk,
Antonio asked. Michael nodded and turned on his heel, exiting the room.
Don't go too far,
Madeline spoke after him.
How did they find out about our arrival? Nobody knows, even at home,
Madeline said, and glanced at Antonio.
It's a target list. Mightn't have anything to do with this trip. They might want to kill us at home.
Ciaran exposed his teeth in a work-with-me smile at Madeline. She could see the twinkle in his eyes. He was amused. Yes, she didn't want to tell Antonio that they came from another universe. He was her old friend when she was an ordinary journalist on Earth, and this could be a little much to take in.
Are you all right? Really, Antonio?
Madeline asked. He wiped the sweat from his eyes with the back of his hand.
Still a bit hazy, but I'm fine. Really, I'm fine.
He took out a handkerchief and wiped his forehead dry.
And I don't think I've been bitten. Welcome to Buenos Aires, by the way.
Madeline smiled. Antonio didn't seem to oppose the notion of a vampire just knocking him out, so she probed.
Do you think there are a lot of vampires in Antarctica?
2 weeks ago, I'd laugh at your question. But recently, there have been many strange deaths around research stations that I've been told have fang marks and are bloodless. Elsewhere, you could have blamed supernatural cults, but not in Antarctica.
Ciaran nodded.
You're right. The creatures wouldn't mind the climate. Since you are open to the idea of these paranormal creatures, I'll let you know this. Antarctica and the surrounding areas overlap with a paranormal world dimension which, at the moment, is controlled by vampires.
So you didn't exactly just want to visit my sister's research station. Rather, you want to get into that vampire's territory.
That is correct, Madeline said.
May I ask why?
We must retrieve an object. There is a group of evil people who also wish to obtain that object. If they get to it before us, we will be in big trouble,
Ciaran said.
What kind of object? And what kind of trouble?
Ciaran shook his head.
Let's say if they succeed, they can detonate the entire Antarctica. You can figure out the consequences.
Who are these people? If there's a possibility for such a catastrophe, I need to get my sister out.
Right. Help us get in there, and we'll help get your sister out,
Madeline said. They heard a cracking sound, as if some wire had been snapped. A stream of yellow liquid leaked out from underneath the door connecting to the adjacent room.
Run!
Ciaran yelled, and picked Madeline up and ran outside in an incredible speed. As soon as they reached the front yard, the small townhouse exploded. Walls, bricks, furniture. Everything that resembled material in that house was torn into pieces, creating a bomb of unrecognizable objects flying toward them. "Get down!" Ciaran yelled. Antonio dove to the ground in a heartbeat. Michael froze. Madeline darted toward the boy to pull the kid down. She saw a piece of broken metal flying at her with speed, with a current flying path that was going to smash her head in. From behind her, Ciaran pulled her backward and shoved at her. She fell to the ground. When she turned back, the piece of metal was inches from Ciaran's left shoulder. That was where her world had ended. Ciaran had left his Yud key, his silver blood, on so that he could move and see things in extreme speed. He wanted to protect her. The left shoulder was where his Yud key was located. If he was hit and the silver blood leaked, it would be the end of him. She screamed and lunged, trying to intercept the object. It was incredible how slow her movement was as a human. The piece of metal hit Ciaran's shoulder, and to her horror, he fell to the ground. Chapter 6. Emily gazed out to the white snow-covered landing patch, which was receiving a special flight route for supplies, researchers, and staff to and from the research station. To everyone else, it was just another day and another delivery to and from Antarctica. But knowing what she knew, every activity on this gigantic piece of ice was no longer ordinary. The Vampire Kingdom. She didn't like to think about it that way. Even worse, it was a territory the vampires had been fighting for control for centuries. She was lucky enough to have an association with the dominant group of vampires, the current winners, the one in charge. As a psychologist, she knew what stigma by association meant. But she didn't have a choice. She did this for love. As far as she was concerned, that was good enough to justify all of her actions. Her brother had called last night. He wanted to take 2 friends to the station to visit her. Her poor brother knew nothing about what she had been up to, but his friends might have been powerful enough to arrange a spot on the direct flight to the station. There was no skin off her nose, so she agreed to it. Antonio certainly didn't know he and his friend were about to pass the most stringent scrutiny screen of the vampires in charge at the landing. But that was what having a good little sister was for. She was to make sure he and his friends were fine. As long as they were genuine tourists, the vampires in charge couldn't care less what they were doing in Antarctica. Speaking of Antonio's friends, one of the names she recognized, Madeline. They dated ages ago. He'd been falling head over heel for this woman. Then somehow they parted. There they came. Emily peered down from the little snow hill where she stood waiting, looking into a pair of monoculars. There was her brother, walking off the plane to the gate. Right behind him was a tall woman, Madeline. Jesus, she must be in her 30s now. She didn't have the head-turning beauty. Compelling was the only word Emily could think of to describe Madeline. For a woman, she wondered if that was even more important than beauty. Walking next to Madeline was a sinfully handsome man, with an arm sliding protectively behind her back. That must be her husband, Ciaran. They walked past the first vampire checkpoint. Emily was sure from their human perspective they were just walking by some technicians checking on the plane and the deliveries. Other staff members were unloading goods onto a sliding cart to get them straight into the ice storage. It was just another day, both for the visitors and for the staff at the station. But Emily knew all of them would have been scanned visually by a vampire staff standing next to the loading cart in delivery uniform. The vampire hired human staff to do housekeeping chores such as scanning and spying on human daily activities. She didn't have the direct connection with the vampire boss, but from what she was told, there was an office somewhere in the middle of Antarctica. Someone was watching every moment of every creature in and out of this piece of ice. Something significant was going to happen in 7 days in their paranormal world and required them to screen and kill any suspicious character who would ruin their plans. She knew the job of screening vampire was to capture visuals of every passenger who disembarked from every flight. And at that very moment, the image of Antonio and his friends would have been in front of a very powerful vampire for examination. She knew her brother. He was a retired journalist. He was a human, and he was here to visit her. He should be fine. She wasn't sure about his friends. If they were up to anything, they would be dead. So would Antonio. So would she. And then the man she loved and worked for. Chapter 7. Isabel tapped her long, manicured fingernails on the table, glancing at the images the screening vampires had just sent her of passengers to and from all flights at each of the human research stations. This was a very tedious task for her, but she wouldn't allow her attention to drift. It wouldn't take long to look at this before she moved on to more hazard-prone areas. The paranormal travelers to and from Antarctica, all paranormal creatures. She stopped at an image that had just come across the screen. She paused when a series of images appeared. A picture of a man filled the screen. He was a lot taller than average height for a Westerner human. She estimated his age at somewhere in his late 30s. Those intense gray eyes. It was the meaning of the gaze that made her hair raise. She had seen this man or his picture somewhere. He stood next to a woman who looked oddly familiar too. The energy screen suggested they were ordinary humans, not creatures. But her gut instinct, the experience of a 1,000-year-old vampire, flagged danger signals. But the danger of what? Who is this couple? What would humans want from her city, given they could even see it? Isabel had been in charge of Vampire City for a few centuries. In the next few days, she would be able to leave this job and be with a man she loved, given she completed her task. In 7 days, she would be free to live for love, forever. At least it was an eternity for her. His natural life may be shorter than hers, but as long as he was with her for whatever time he had, she was happy. She needed to complete the task. She needed nothing to go wrong in the paranormal world in the next 7 days. She was not having a good day right now. Not at all. She was on edge, a nervousness that she rarely experienced. She found out one of her very capable subordinate vampires had been feeding on humans around Antarctica, against her order. She had to execute him, and loss of competent staff was significant. She set the rules. She had to follow through with them. That was what would happen to those who acted against her orders. Then Alex, her second-in-charge vampire, was nowhere to be found. He might have taken off on his private mission without telling her. Alex was a man of secrets. In 7 days, the event was important not only for her and her lover, but for her city as well. She would transfer the management over to Alex. He wasn't the best, but one of the older vampires who could handle this position. The final preparations for the transformation were underway, an enormous amount of work and pressure. No chances were to be taken. The eyes of the entire paranormal world would be watching. The empire she'd built for centuries was at stake. The consequences for failure, any failure, no matter how seemingly insignificant, was unacceptable. Isabel studied the pictures again. She searched her memories again for when and where she had seen this couple's pictures. She had to figure this out for herself. She stood in cross dimensions, standing next to the couple in a small reception room of the station. If they were genuinely human, they wouldn't be able to see her unless she allowed them by crossing into their dimension. She could stand right next to them, in her dimension, and switch dimensions in lightning speed to rip their throats out. Then she could cross back to her dimension. From a human's perspective, all they'd be able to see was the couple had just dropped dead with their throats hanging out without any explanation. If they were genuine humans, they would be oblivious to her being in the same room with them right now, and the possibility that she could kill them in a heartbeat. Well, heartbeat was what she didn't have, but she could certainly use the analogy for measure. The man looked straight through her, as if he didn't see her. She turned around. His eyes must have landed on a shelf with a bottle of scotch displayed in the cabinet.
I'm sure you can do better than that. I can supply the entire year of consumption of much better alcohol if you desire.
Everyone laughed. A man standing at a corner said,
Alcohol consumption is restricted. No point bribing us with it, Ciaran. But we could do for better quality food and medicine for field trips.
Ciaran. How familiar. Isabel searched her memories again. Another man said,
I'll hold LeBlanc Pharmaceuticals to that. Good medical supplies are very important to us. Not that we don't have enough, but your products are the best. We don't have access to your supplies.
Ciaran LeBlanc. Now she got it. Isabel almost yelped out of joy. Rumor had it that he was the king of a universe, somewhere she had never been. So the rumor was wrong. He was definitely a human in front of her now. She could kill him right now. She whirled around him to see if he reacted. Nothing. She brushed her fingertips on his throat. No reaction. No, she wouldn't kill him. Creating more human deaths would cause unnecessary problems. Ciaran chuckled.
I still consider us newlyweds. So yes, the only thing I'd like to do here is to fulfill a promise to my wife. Take her to see the Antarctica penguins.
People laughed again. Yes, you better. I married you because of this promise, the woman said and smiled. It was so obvious that she was in love with her husband, so much that it seeped out of every pore in her body. Isabel could smell it. She wondered if she would be that happy after the 7 days had passed. One of her assistants rushed into the room so fast that he almost created a blast of cold wind that blew into the dimension the humans were standing. She glared at the young vampire. What?
Breach at the south gate. A creature passed our screen.
Her head wanted to explode right now. Could she last 1 day without having an incident? She whirled out of the human research station and back to her lavish office in the tower in her city. Chapter 8. Ciaran waited until he and Madeline were alone in their cabin to sit down on the tiny bed. He waited for the dizziness to pass. He was still quite weak. He had come very close to dying. He could switch his Yud-Key back on to heal faster, but he had to wear the human form for as long as he could when they were passing the vampire gate. They couldn't be discovered. Madeline pulled the shirt down and examined a gigantic black and blue bruise on his left shoulder. Yes, he'd gotten hit, but he had been careful enough to wear the shield, and it had protected him against the impact. He knew he scared her, but if he hadn't left his silver blood on, they both would have been dead in Buenos Aires. As it was, the hit had dazed him for hours. His death would have been torturous for his wife.
Did you feel the presence of a creature in the reception room just now?
He asked to ease the awkwardness between them. Yes, she said, and buttoned up his shirt.
A vampire, to be precise. It brushed at my neck to see if I reacted,
he said, and sank a bit deeper in the bed. They heard a faint snap in the air, like an electronic spark, and a sensation they'd both developed since they were still human. They could tell when paranormal creatures were sharing the same space with them. Madeline hopped on the bed, pushing him down, and kissed him. He enjoyed the look on her face. So human, full of passion, love, and lust. He knew she was still mad at him, and she would pound on any unfortunate creatures that were lurking around, so he would cooperate with her just to ease the pressure off him. In a heartbeat, she switched on her Yud-Key. She pulled out a folded katana he had made her and jumped across dimensions. Ciaran was right behind her. He was a lot faster and stronger than her, but he understood his wife's competitive nature. He kept a few steps behind her. They were on the roof of the cabin. A shadow hopped down to the back of the building and darted toward the darkness. Madeline trailed right behind. She kicked a small ball of snow off from the ground and swung her sword at it. A comic move that always amused Ciaran. He didn't think it would work, but it did. The snow rained on the vampire. He paused and turned around, angry. He was fast, lean, tall, and appeared quite strong for Madeline. But Ciaran refrained from interfering with the fight. His wife didn't look as if she needed a rescue. She tightened her grip on her katana, lifted her chin up in challenge, and took her combat stance. The vampire smirked. He whirled around and circled Madeline in extreme speed and approached her from behind. He grabbed her from the back and bent forward. He was going to bite her. His fangs popped down, and he looked as if he was drooling. Madeline hunched down, bending forward. One of her favorite Aikido moves she used when a stronger and taller opponent grabbed her from behind. The vampire's hands were still on her shoulders and appeared to grip at them hard. When she bent forward and turned her shoulders sideway in a swift motion, he had lost not only his grip, but his balance. Madeline turned around and swung her katana. The vampire jerked back, but the blade had cut into his shoulder. He hissed as his flesh burned and his blood sizzled. Ciaran had made the blade out of top-graded silver. Precious metal was one of his expertise. Madeline followed with a kick to the abdomen, sending the vampire to the ground, lying flat on his back. She pointed the blade to his throat.
"Who sent you?" she asked.
Don't kill me.
"Then tell us who sent you."
I don't know. It's a contract. I get paid. I killed those on the blood list. But I only kill humans. I didn't know you were creatures. I'm sorry. Don't kill me.
Ciaran cocked an eyebrow. I don't like the sound of him calling us creatures.
"Me neither,"
Madeline muttered, and pushed the sword harder. It cut into the vampire's flesh. He screamed in agony.
All right. I'll tell you how and where I got the contract. It will lead you to my client.
Ciaran nodded. Madeline eased off the sword. The vampire sat up, contemplative. He looked up at Ciaran and Madeline and opened his mouth. But before a word could come out, a shadow darted past. The head of the vampire they'd been speaking to dropped on the ground, rolling a short distance and stopped, creating a small blood pool in the snow. In front of them was a male vampire, looking to be in his 30s. By his composure, his formidability, and his movements, Ciaran wagered this was a very old vampire who held significant rank in his world. The vampire cast a glance on Ciaran and Madeline, measured. Ciaran pushed Madeline behind him.
Who are you, and why did you kill him?
Ciaran demanded. The vampire smirked.
He attempted to reveal his master. Just for that, he deserves to die.
"Are you his master?"
Madeline asked. The vampire smiled, a curving of the lips that held no humor.
No, he's a coward. There is no place for cowards in my city.
Ciaran pulled his folded sword, swung it so it stretched out to full length, and like Madeline's, his was a king's sword. He swung the sword toward the vampire. As Ciaran had anticipated, the vampire swung his sword to block. They both staggered back after the sword clash, eyeing each other.
If you wanted to kill me, you should have pulled your silver bullet gun, but you didn't. If you want to test how strong I am, you only have to ask. Now you know. You're quite strong yourself, the vampire muttered. You haven't seen a fraction of my power.
As fast as lightning, Ciaran switched his Yud-Ki on and charged at the vampire. Their swords clashed again. Ciaran attacked the vampire without holding back. The vampire withdrew. Ciaran liked it. He never fought a vampire before. He loved to put them on a lab table and examine their strength so that he could design special weapons against them. The vampire kept withdrawing. Ciaran kept advancing. When the vampire hit a snow cliff, he turned and looked at Ciaran. Ciaran had the sword pointing at his throat.
Take me to Vampire City, and I'll let you live for the rest of your unnatural life, Ciaran snarled. I don't kill humans, the vampire grunted. Regardless of the form you're wearing, you're fundamentally human, and I won't kill you.
Ciaran pressed his sword harder.
I don't think you're in a position to say that.
Ciaran's king sword had power, but it wasn't a silver sword. The vampire grabbed at the blade. Before Ciaran could react, he was on the ground. The vampire's hand was around his throat, and Madeline was screaming. The vampire reached his free hand out for Madeline. Ciaran swiveled out of the vampire's grip and swung a round hound kick at his head. The vampire staggered back. His fangs popped down. Ciaran pulled his silver bullet gun and pointed it at the vampire.
"This is not how I want to do it, but we've got things to do. Can't mess around with a sword forever. My offer stays. Take me to your city, and I will let you live."
The vampire swiveled. Ciaran shot. The bullet hit the vampire's shoulder, but he managed to run past Ciaran and kicked Madeline. She flew away several feet and dropped over the edge of the cliff. Ciaran darted over, grabbing at Madeline's hands. The vampire picked up his sword and pressed it against Ciaran's neck from behind.
"If you must know, let me tell you, I won't kill you because you are Antonio's friends. But I can't guarantee others would be so kind. I know you're strong, but a wise man wouldn't mess around with a vampire in a vampire's territory. Here is my offer to you. If you both leave here tomorrow, I will let you live for the rest of your natural lives."
He cut into Ciaran's neck. A stream of blood came down.
"Let this be a reminder,"
he muttered, and turned around, vanishing into the icy air. Chapter 9. The vampire's dead body had turned into a lump of blood and gore, gradually absorbing into the white snow.
"How are we going to hide this body, or whatever's left of it?"
Madeline asked, glaring at the wound on Ciaran's neck. He had his Yudki on, so it would heal quickly. Ciaran shook his head.
"There is no point. We're exposed. The vampire who just left, he's high-ranked. If he wanted to tell the vampire authorities, or whatever equivalent, then there is nothing we can do about it."
"You really don't know the way to go to Vampire City?"
Ciaran shook his head.
"We can see the city, but going in is a totally different matter, let alone getting into the headquarters."
"Why did the vampire say he wouldn't kill us because we are Antonio's friends?"
Madeline asked.
"That's the question I meant to ask you."
Madeline shook her head.
"I don't know more than what I have already told you. Antonio and I worked together for a year. We dated for about 6 months within that period. I had no idea he has anything to do with paranormal creatures."
"What about his sister, Emily? She works at a research station. Do you think this has anything to do with her?"
"Well, Emily and I only met once. I don't know much about her."
"There was one easy way to find out," Ciaran smiled. "We ask them."
"But first we have to have our Yudki on, so we can see the city from here?"
Madeline asked. Ciaran nodded. He jumped a couple of steps and hopped on top of a cabin. He reached his hand out to take Madeline's. In front of them, human eyes would only see the pitch-black piece of icy continent, a no-man land. A mass of quietness, as if the air and life had been sucked out of the plain. But their supernatural eyes enjoyed a different vision. A magnificent city of vampires. Roads, houses, buildings, and light. It was another world within a world. It was a lightened world within the dead and dull world of the ice. It was a lively world of the undead. "Wow," she said. Ciaran smiled. He anticipated her reaction. He knew about this city, but she didn't. He needed to know his enemies to be able to defend his universe. Among his group of adversaries, this city of the undead in Antarctica was among the lowest ranks, but they were the starting point. The endless snowy landscape connected to the tree-lined Grand Boulevard, leading to the main tower in the city, a monument to remind lower-rank vampires and other creatures of the absolute power of the one in charge. Ciaran narrowed his eyes, looking at the tower in the middle of the city. He knew what was there. He knew how significant it was to get in there and complete his mission. But there were so many variables to speculate, and his wife need not worry about it.
The station with the Virgo key would be in the middle of that, don't you think? Madeline asked.
No, it would be in one of the ghost research stations, slightly at the outskirts of the city. We don't have the exact location yet, because these stations aren't on the record, but we'll soon find out.
Is there a vampire research station, too? Madeline asked.
Ciaran chuckled. We call them ghost research stations, because they aren't on official record. They don't belong to any government. They are in Antarctica illegally, mainly for the minerals.
Well, how can I not know this? I was a good journalist. Why can't satellites pick them up?
Ciaran laughed. They are all equipped with jammers, Madeline. In a word, they are invisible to technology on Earth, and journalists, even the best ones.
Madeline narrowed her eyes. So how do you know about this? Does your pharmaceutical empire have anything here?
Ciaran shook his head. Not here.
Jesus Christ! That means you have ghost stations elsewhere?
He rubbed his freezing hands together. Of course we do. For research purposes. Ciaran winked at her and smiled. With the acute senses they possessed whenever their silver blood was on at full capacity, they heard the faint sound of an argument. From the top of the cabin, they peered down to a compartment opposite. It looks like we don't need to go to them. They are coming to us, Ciaran muttered. Across the snow yard was a red oval cabin, looking like a gigantic helmet. Emily rushed over and pulled Antonio's elbow, who was heading toward their cabin.
Don't do that, Antonio,
they overheard Emily say to her brother.
I can take care of myself. They can't help.
She sounded as if she was trying to keep her voice as low as possible, and, although she was whispering, she also sounded panicked.
The only reason I brought them here is because they can help you,
Antonio growled.
Ciaran can arrange a private flight for you. I want you out of here, and in a safe place.
Where on earth can you find such a place for me? And put it the other way around, big brother. What did you do that placed the prize on your head?
Ciaran and Madeline stepped out from the shadow.
Jesus Christ, make some noise when you move. I thought you were them,
Antonio exclaimed, raising a hand to his chest.
Them?
Madeline arched an eyebrow. Antonio lowered his voice and whispered,
Those bloodsuckers.
Antonio!
Emily raised her voice.
She doesn't believe me,
Antonio said to Madeline and Ciaran.
I told her about you wanting to visit a ghost station. She said there isn't anything like that here, and she refused to believe that this place is full of those creatures.
Antonio waved his arms in the air in frustration.
I'm a scientist,
Emily shot back, fuming.
I don't believe in paranormal. But even if this place is full of them, then so what? Vampires are creatures too. Why can't they coexist with us?
Antonio snorted, looking at his sister as if she'd just grown 2 heads. Well, it's irrelevant how you classify species, Emily, Ciaran said to her, interrupting the sibling squabble. People have different beliefs, and I have learned to respect that. Trust me, it was a hard lesson. We need you to guide us to the ghost stations, then we can take it from there. Once we're done, I can arrange another place for you to live safely for the rest of your life.
Who do you think you are, Ciaran?
Emily sneered at him.
Why?
Antonio is on a kill list.
Madeline interrupted her, growing irritated.
You're in some sort of tangled mess that you're not telling your brother. What we are offering here could get you out of this problem.
I don't have a problem,
Emily growled, but grew quieter, more thoughtful. They heard a faint sound of footsteps. Before they could register what was going on, shadows flew at them. 4 vampires jumped out from another dimension and grabbed at them, clawing and flashing their teeth. Ciaran glanced at Madeline quickly to signal her to stay in human form. This was a dangerous fight, and things could get messy. It was less dangerous to be injured as human, because they can heal using the silver blood. But if they were hit at a critical point, when the Yude key was on, it was fatal. As human, still, they fought off the vampires on them easily. It took a little longer than they had wanted, but they knocked down the rookie vampires with a few swift moves. The combat training and all the battles they had been in through their universe made this encounter trivial. It wasn't the same story for Emily and Antonio. Ciaran grabbed at Emily when a vampire tried to drag her away, but he couldn't get to Antonio in time. He was dragged away quickly. What was left of Antonio was a blood trail and trail marks in the snow, which soon disappeared.
Antonio!
Emily cried out.
How could he just vanish like that? Antonio!
She kicked and screamed while Ciaran held her back. Chapter 10. Traveling as humans in Antarctica wasn't easy. Emily notified the research station, and a search and rescue process for Antonio had begun. It was a small team, but fully equipped with snowmobiles, medical equipment, and a helicopter to fly when the weather condition allowed. Ciaran took Madeline to the main bunker at the research station. He glanced around and predicted that the creatures weren't around. Neither of them had their Yudki switched on, so there was not much from the other dimension that he could see. As human, Madeline's natural psychic ability was the most valuable asset for them now. "Are there any creatures or unusual appearances in the room, Madeline?" Ciaran asked. Madeline listened carefully and after a moment shook her head. The bunker was like any ordinary cafeteria. People were everywhere. A table located in the middle of the room, a small kitchen tucked in a corner where hot tea and coffee were stocked. The search for Antonio had made the place busier than usual. At a quiet corner, Emily was packing some light gear to go with the search team. Ciaran approached her, followed by Madeline. "What did you tell the search team?" Ciaran asked.
"That my brother is missing,"
Emily said through her teeth, anxiety creating lines on her face. Her eyes had teared up, and she was furiously blinking them away.
"You know what took him," Madeline said gently. "Human search and rescue won't work."
A tear ran down Emily's face.
"But we can't see them, those creatures, only when they allow us."
Ciaran glanced around to ensure no staff was lurking nearby. "They aren't invisible, Emily. Vampires can travel with supernatural speed, and because of that, they can cross dimensions. They coexist with us, here, but in a different dimension. That's why we can't see them. You're a scientist. I'm sure you understand that." Emily looked into Ciaran's eyes.
"And who are you two? Really?"
Ciaran looked at Madeline, who nodded and gave him a little smile. He turned back toward Emily. "Not long ago, we were just like you, human, living on Earth. Now we are still human, but we have several special abilities, and we live in another universe, another world that is far from here." Emily looked back and forth between Madeline and Ciaran. She contemplated.
"What is it called? The universe you live in?"
"Udays. The native Udasians are beautiful and happy people. It's a place of peace and happiness. We govern that universe." Ciaran glanced at Madeline after he spoke.
"Govern? At what level?"
Ciaran said nothing. Madeline smiled.
"Let's say we have some authority. We can take in new people, if that's what you're concerned about." "What about access? How secure is your universe?"
Ciaran smiled. "Udays belongs to native Udasians. It's exclusive. We can take individuals in from other universes, Earth included, but they have to be worthy. They have to contribute. It's not easy to get in, but once you are one of us, we promise you ultimate protection."
"So, it's totally safe from the outside world? I mean, from all other creatures?"
She looked around, eyes wide. Ciaran smiled. "It's a promise, not a guarantee. We are mortal."
"What do you want me to do to get spots in your universe?"
"You mean 2 passes to our universe, for you and your brother?" She nodded. "Well, you need to do 2 things for us," Ciaran said. "I can tell you the first one now, and the second one later."
Madeline narrowed her eyes, staring at the girl. Wait, I'm sensing that one of the spots is for Antonio, but the other spot is not for you? Who is it for? Ciaran looked surprised, then smiled and looked at Madeline. His wife wasn't the first counselor for no good reason. Emily looked startled, then frowned and glanced out the tiny round window on the bunker wall. She blew out a breath and said, "When you're about to give me the second task, I'll tell you who the second person is, and you can still decide whether or not you want to take that individual in." Ciaran nodded. "Sounds like a fair deal. Now we need to find a ghost research station. I understand there are no maps or directory to get there, so you will take us there. Consider it the first task." Emily nodded and opened her mouth, but Ciaran held up his hand. "But first things first. We'll search for Antonio," he promised her. "I have an impression I know where they're taking him." "Thank you."
Ciaran smiled and laid a hand on her shoulder. "Antonio is Madeline's friend. That's what we do for friends, Emily." Then he strode out of the station. Madeline trailed right behind him. When they were out of earshot, he asked, "How do you know about the other person?" Madeline smiled. "Not just a person. She loves that individual. And he's a creature. I don't need much of a psychic ability to tell when a woman is in love. The question is, why didn't she just ask for 3 passes?" Ciaran chuckled. "There is no need to find the answer for that question. When the time comes, we can offer 3 passes." Ciaran walked around the corner in between the 2 large bunkers. He grabbed at Madeline, put her against the wall, and lowered his mouth to hers. She closed her eyes and lost herself in the kiss. He knew she enjoyed it. He felt her body melt against his. He loved the look on her face, passion, love, and lust. She always gave it all when they were intimate. There he used the only natural connection to Madeline that no technology and paranormal creatures could interfere with. They were soulmates. This was one of the perks. In his mind, he spoke to her. "They're coming for me. Let them." Madeline's eyes flew open. At the same time, 2 vampires jumped out of the other dimension and struck Ciaran from behind. He fell, hitting his head on a low platform at the base of the steel-enforced wall of the bunker. The other vampire struck him when he attempted to sit up. Ciaran let himself pass out. The vampires took him into the other dimension. In his mind, he still heard Madeline screaming for help. Chapter 11. Madeline accelerated the snowmobile. It jerked, skid, and spun around for a distance, and stopped a few inches before an elephant seal. The seal popped his head up, looking at them, annoyed. Then he laid down to sleep again. Emily jumped off the vehicle.
Jesus Christ! Have you ever driven a snowmobile before? There is no speed limit in Antarctica, but we can still break our necks.
"I can walk faster than you drive," Madeline snarled. "We've seen 3 ghost stations and haven't found the one we need."
There are many of them. I don't know when we'll find the one you want. I know you're anxious because they took Ciaran, but my brother was taken too.
"Anxious?" Madeline sneered. "Try moving mountains and crossing oceans to marry him and not even having a day of peace with him. Try having twins as your first children in a totally strange universe. Try calming the kids when their first words were daddy, and he wasn't even home to hear it because he was busy saving another universe. Try answering to those billions of citizens who depend on his protection."
Okay, Emily said more gently. You're not anxious. You're royally pissed.
"I am multiple altitudes beyond anger. Do you know how many times he almost died in front of me? I've lost count. Madeline do this, Madeline do that. He never asked me if I could. And just now all he said was, 'They're coming for me. Let them.' That was all he gave me." Madeline waved her arms in the air and walked back and forth. "Let them," she said as she continued to rant. "That was all he said. And I stood there squealing like a useless pig when they took him."
Emily held Madeline's shoulders firmly and looked into her eyes, which were filled with tears now.
Madeline, you're scared. Honey's natural.
Madeline wiped at the tear that ran down her face.
I'm not scared. I'm Ciaran's wife. I can't be scared. That trait doesn't fit in with the LeBlancs.
Come on, deep breaths. You'll be fine. He'll be fine. Didn't you say he did that because he knew they'd take him to Antonio?
Madeline nodded and wiped at her eyes.
I know. Sorry. I've just lost it for a bit.
She wiped the rest of the tears from her face and proceeded toward the snowmobile. A short moment later, they arrived at the front of an imposing structure in the snow, an enormous round structure the size of a football stadium and the shape of a spaceship loomed over them. Madeline didn't need to pull out the list Ciaran had given her, nor did she need to check with the built-in computer in her wrist unit for extraterrestrial energy. She just knew this was the one.
This is it,
she muttered.
What?
Emily asked, looking at the building with wide eyes.
This is the research station with the key you are looking for? Are you sure?
Very sure. Emily walked back and forth, shoving her hands in her pockets.
Madeline, there are many more stations that I can take you to. Are you sure this is the one?
Earlier today you denied the existence of ghost stations, and now you say there are many others. What's going on, Emily? Why the denials and lies?
Emily shook her head.
Don't ask. It's complicated, she muttered.
They proceeded toward the steel door. It slid open as soon as they arrived. Madeline jerked back.
How does it recognize us?
She asked. Madeline turned to look at Emily. Emily didn't seem surprised. Her eyes had darkened. She clenched her jaw and her hands had curled into fists.
It's me it recognized. This is my off-the-record base station. If my brother was taken because of what they are doing here, I'll burn them alive in the middle of Antarctica.
Madeline took one more step back away from the door. From inside the station, a man stepped outside. He nodded at Emily and smiled.
Emily, I thought you wouldn't come until tomorrow.
And I thought you were away for another 2 days,
Emily said, her face now lifted into a fake smile. She glanced at Madeline.
This is Adam Rodriguez, the chief research and manager at this station. This is Madeline, my friend.
A friend? You know we don't allow casual visitors.
Adam narrowed his eyes.
Listen.
Emily lowered her voice and approached Adam. When she was close enough, she pulled out a knife and slid it under his thermal jacket.
I need you to make an exception. We just want to come inside for a cup of tea.
She pushed him back inside the building. Madeline followed. The door closed behind them. Chapter 12. A cool hand brushed over the wound on his forehead. It worried Ciaran. The first thought that came to his mind was he needed to heal the injury that was causing him excruciating headaches. But through the haze of physical pain, the basic instinct he possessed, and the silver blood running inside him, had given him a good resistance to reacting naturally to his surroundings. Someone might be reading his mind right now. The second thought that came to his mind was,
this hurt like a bitch. What the hell?
He let out a small groan and slowly opened his eyes. The room was enormous. He was lying on something soft and comfortable, maybe a sofa or a daybed. A woman was looking down at him, gorgeous, brunette, deep dark eyes, mysterious, intriguing. That was the third thought he had carefully manufactured. He sat up and let out another moan for the pain in his body. This thought might be genuine.
Sorry, my guys were a little rough.
A throaty voice came from the woman.
Is there anything I can do to make it up to you?
Ciaran raked his hands through his hair.
You're a vampire.
Oh, so you know us?
No, I don't. One of your guys had his fangs popped out. It isn't Halloween now, and I'm not stupid. So what else can I guess?
Clumsy, the beautiful vampire hissed.
Yeah, I should have moved faster.
No, not you. Those useless rookies. I shouldn't have sent them. And they hurt you. I really should do something to fix this. My name is Isabel. She bit the tip of her finger and was about to press her bloody fingertip on the wound on his forehead. Ciaran jerked back.
No, thank you. I'll be fine.
No, you're not. You thought, it hurts like a bitch. And you thought I am beautiful. Isabel smiled.
Oh, so you read minds. But you don't have to read this, because I'm telling you now. You're holding me against my will, and I'd like to go back to the research station with my wife.
The smile faded on Isabel's face.
What are you here for, Ciaran LeBlanc? I know you're a very big deal in the human world. You now know that I read minds. So don't lie. Madeline always wanted to see Antarctica penguins.
Is that right? Why didn't you fetch some to London for her to see? I am sure that's easy enough to do for a man like you.
There are many things money can't buy.
Like Antarctica penguins?
Yes, like them.
Isabel smiled. You always travel with an arsenal of anti-vampire weapons on your body? She pointed her chin toward her desk, where all of his weapons were on display.
I'm paranoid about vampire attacks.
He looked her up and down.
For very good reasons.
Fast and fierce as a storm, Isabel grabbed Ciaran, flung him across the floor. He crashed into furniture and whatever objects that weren't friendly with his human body. He could hear his bones rattle. She darted over, picked him up from the floor, and zoomed across the room. She pressed his face against the wall, looking out and down to the vampire city. He recognized the tower he was in. The tower, the symbol of the city power. He was inside it. He had to be patient, play the game. I am the mayor of the city. I am in charge, and I always get what I want. I am sure a man of your caliber isn't paranoid about anything as petty as vampire attacks. I heard you have supernatural power now. Why don't you use it and fight me?
I don't hurt women. Having power or not is irrelevant.
I ask for the last time. What are you here for?
In addition to the penguins, I wouldn't mind seeing some seals.
Isabel threw him across the room. His body smashed to the wall. He didn't hear his bones rattle this time. Maybe there were none left. She picked him up again and squeezed at his neck. Fight or die, Ciaran.
I'm just a man. What hope do I have fighting a vampire barehanded?
She threw him over the desk, crashing him on his own weapons. He saw stars. Every cell in his body wanted to depart from one another. Pick up your weapons and fight me. He gathered whatever human strength was left in his body, stood up, and wiped the blood on his mouth. He looked at her.
You're an angry woman, Isabel. I told you why I'm here. What else do you want? Money?
She flew over, grabbed at his neck, and threw him to the opposite wall like he was a rag doll. He dropped bonelessly to the bottom of the wall. He lay on the floor motionless, and he emptied his mind. Isabel's voice whispered against his ear. I know you can hear me. No human mind could be emptied like that. Open your eyes. Then we can talk. I promise I'll be gentle. Come on, you're a tough guy. What if I make you a vampire now? How do you feel about that? If you don't say anything, I'll take it as a yes. He could feel her fangs grazing on his neck, and his blood ran down in streams. He let his body lay defenseless in her arms and filled his mind with the memories of Madeline. He thought of the time they'd spent together, their happy moments. He saw her face in the temple of the eternal flame when they got married. He remembered the most precious moment when they consummated their love. Isabel hissed and dropped him to the floor. "Guard!" she called out. He heard footsteps. Someone came inside the room. Someone lifted his shoulders.
Is he dead? A male voice asked.
No, he's not dead. Put him on the sofa over there. Where did you put the other guy? Isabel growled.
In the basement.
Why did it take so long to get him here?
The human doctor you hired at the research station. He wanted to take the guy. It took ages to get the guy back. I told the doctor he needs your permission, but he wouldn't listen.
Well, he should ask for my permission. But sometimes he forgets who he really is. I'll make sure I remind him. Now tie this one up and go down to the basement with me.
Tie him? He doesn't look like he'll be moving soon.
Do you know who this man is? Tie him.
Yes, Isabel.
The high heels clanked on the cold floor, heading toward the distance. He could feel the vampire tuck a rope loosely around his wrists, mumbling some apologies at the same time. Then the door slammed. Quiet. A few seconds passed. More silence. He slightly opened his eyes. There was no one around. Ciaran concentrated and switched on his Ud key. He waited for a few seconds. The pain had become a mist. He stopped the healing process to leave some physical wounds present. He moved his hand slightly, and in a short moment, he freed himself. He sat up and glanced around, noted his position on the sofa, just in case he had to return to playing dead. He was about to wipe the blood on his neck, but he thought better of it and left it smeared across his skin. He stood up and surveyed the room. It was a magnificent office, lavish, the most powerful spot in the heart of Vampire City. He located a large painting on the wall and shook his head.
How cliché,
he muttered, and approached the painting. He took the painting off the wall, and behind it was the door of a steel safe. Ciaran pressed his palm on the key panel and entered a series of code and commands into his wrist unit. In a couple of seconds, the lock clicked open.
Who would have thought a vampire's mind could be so simple?
He opened the door of the safe and pulled out a small box. Inside the box was a red round stone glaring back at him. He took the stone out of the box, admired it for a brief moment, and slid it into his pocket. He collected his weapons. Then he heard footsteps approaching the door. Chapter 13. Madeline followed Emily, who still had the knife against Adam's back, and pushed him toward his office. They advanced to the upper deck of the station. Madeline checked the platform and saw nothing suspicious. There were no signs or scent of creatures around the station. As the doors whispered shut and the horizontal cart pulled away, Madeline discreetly nodded at Emily. Emily shoved Adam into his office and slammed the door closed. Outside, 2 men in uniform were talking to a technician. Another staff exited the platform and went to the lower deck. Madeline took the time to scan the environment of the station she felt sure was hiding the Virgo key somewhere. It was the most impressive research station in Antarctica yet. Fancy lights were spaced at regular intervals along the high vaulted ceiling. Endless steel doors seemed to have been polished to a ridiculous sheen. It was more like a space station where they made space shuttles than a research station claiming to research wildlife in the South Pole.
"What do you want?"
Adam grunted out the question.
"There is an artifact hidden in the station that we need to retrieve," Madeline told him. "You know what I'm talking about. So, do you want to tell us where it is? Or do you want us to turn the whole place upside down?"
Adam snorted.
"Just the two of you and a pathetic knife?"
"This pathetic knife was enough to scare you,"
Emily said. Adam shook his head, and one corner of his mouth lifted.
"I'm not scared. I didn't want to hurt you. There have been enough accidents in this place. It's only a research station. What do you want, really?"
"I told you," Madeline said, irritated.
"I don't know any artifact hidden here. Yes, this station is illegal, but apart from stealing minerals, we don't do anything else."
"You collect blood,"
Emily said.
Bullshit, Adam growled. Do you think Dr. Ivan Costa really researches Antarctica wildlife? Emily sneered. I don't know. You tell me. You're his research assistant.
Who is Ivan Costa? Madeline asked. What does he have to do with all this?
You helped Ivan collect blood from animals and humans, Emily accused him, looking at him with disgust. Rubbish, Adam shot back. This is total bullshit, Emily. He only collects blood samples for research. I didn't do anything wrong. You turned a blind eye on human bloodless bodies with fang marks. He stared at her, some of his rage deflating. That has nothing to do with Ivan.
So what does that have to do with vampires? Madeline asked.
You don't know what you're talking about, Adam insisted. You might not love your life, but I do love mine. I don't know anything about an artifact. I'm retiring in 2 days. Leave me alone.
Adam turned to leave the office, but Emily thrust the knife at him again.
Since you love your life that much, let me tell you, Ivan works for the most notorious paranormal creature you have ever known. He collects human blood, and he used vampires to collect his samples.
Adam stared at her, processing what she'd said.
Maybe, he conceded, but still it has nothing to do with me. Why don't you come back in a few days and talk to the new manager? Who would that be? Isabel Mendoza.
Never heard of that name, Emily said. Madeline looked at Adam. What exactly do you have to do before you retire? He lifted his chin as if considering whether he should tell them. Then he blew out a breath.
All I have to do is run the drill one more time.
How many people in the station can run the drill?
At the moment, only me. Isabel will take in new people and provide them with training.
Madeline snorted. Are you naive or ignorant? The object that we are trying to retrieve will trigger an explosion that will sink the Antarctica if you remove it. Do you know the consequences of that?
That's not possible, Adam yelled. Do you know what you're talking about?
He took a deep breath and thought things through for a moment.
Okay, let's say if that is the case, why try to retrieve it? If you leave it where it is, wouldn't that solve the problem?
In 2 days, someone will try to take the object, Madeline told him. The person might be Isabel, or maybe whoever hired her. And the object, I think it's under the water. That's why you have to drill down.
But you tried to get the object too, Adam said, glaring at her. So why talk about the consequence of the explosion?
Because we will shield the astrological hole before taking the key. It will stop the explosion, and we will keep the key at a safe place.
Why should I trust you?
Madeline gave Adam a stern stare. You don't have a choice, she said. Before Isabel takes over the station, who is keeping you in check? You have 2 options, Madeline interrupted him. I can kill you and interrogate all the staff in the station until I find out. Or you can tell me. I will take care of the person for you, and we'll be good. Madeline concentrated and switched on her silver blood. In a second, she pulled out her katana sword and slit the wooden shelf next to Adam in half without moving any objects on it. Adam gaped. Madeline swung the sword horizontal, cutting the shelf across. Still no objects moved. Then she approached and used her pinky to nudge at the shelf. The whole structure collapsed. It was Emily's turn to gape. Who is the contact person when Isabel isn't here? Madeline repeated her question. Adam swallowed and met her eyes.
He isn't a guy you want to mess around with.
Madeline arched an eyebrow. I don't mess around with anyone. Who?
Okay. It's Dr. Ivan Costa.
What? Emily exclaimed. They heard a whistle from the door. Madeline turned around and saw a formidable man standing with a gun in his hand.
Someone mentioned my name? He said.
Chapter 14.
Ciaran pressed his knife against a vampire's back, pushing him forward. The silver blade burned his flesh, making him hiss and growl. The vampire tapped on a small door in a basement. A small window opened from the inside, and a pair of eyes beamed out.
What? I need to take the prisoner to Isabel.
She just left.
Well, she changed her mind and sent me back.
Why?
Why don't you ask her yourself? Now open the door.
The door swung open. Ciaran threw the vampire he was holding inside, falling on top of the other vampire. When they both scrambled up, he had his sword pointed at them.
One wrong move, and I'll detach your heads from your bodies. I wager neither of you want to try my temper, so stay still.
The warden vampire darted at Ciaran. He swung his sword. The vampire's head dropped on the floor, rolling toward the corner of the room.
Do I need to prove my point again?
Ciaran asked the remaining vampire. The creature shook his head.
How many of you are in this tower?
More than 40. Isabel took about 10 with her.
Where did she go?
Some trouble caused by newcomers.
Where and who?
I don't know.
Think harder.
Ciaran thrust the blade toward the vampire's arm, cutting into it. The vampire's flesh sizzled. The vampire hissed.
All right, okay. I heard it was somewhere in a human research station. I don't know where and why. I heard there are 2 women causing trouble, so Isabel had to go and sort it out.
Ciaran smiled on the inside. He knew who the 2 women were. He came to the corner where Antonia was chained to the wall, unconscious.
Did she torture him?
Was about to, but didn't have a chance. She just sedated him.
Wake him and unchain him.
The vampire obeyed. In a short moment, Antonio sat up, groggily on the ground. Ciaran crouched.
I'm going to take you out of here, but we have something to do before we can get back to the research station. Can you walk?
Antonio nodded and stood up. Ciaran signaled the vampire to lead to the door. They exited the basement corridor and headed toward the upper floor for the entrance. In the foyer, a group of more than 30 vampires stood, waiting for them.
I don't want to kill you all, so before you advance on us, you might want to check out the examples in the basement,
Ciaran said. The vampire smirked and snorted, clearly unconvinced. One lunged in their direction, and Ciaran pulled out a small round device, holding it toward the brave one, who skidded to a halt. Satisfied that he had them cornered, Ciaran placed the device on the floor.
This is a silver bomb. It's triggered by movement sensor and remote control. I wouldn't recommend you test it on yourselves. Neither you nor any of your friends will be very happy, so stay really still where you are.
Ciaran and Antonio withdrew very slowly toward the door and exited the building while the vampire stood frozen, staring at a flashing device on the floor. Once outside, Ciaran tucked the remote control away.
How does your sensor work? We got out. I'm sure we made some movement,
Antonio asked.
I bluffed. It works by remote control only. Turns out, vampires are quite gullible,
Ciaran chuckled. Antonio shoved his hand into Ciaran's pocket and yanked out the remote control. Before Ciaran could stop him, he pressed the activate button, pointing it toward the building. From the distance, they saw a silver flume leak out of the building and shoot into the sky like a small volcano. Screams from the vampires tore the air before their throats closed up and their brains shut down, before they died a true death.
That was unnecessary,
Ciaran roared at Antonio.
Why did you do that?
Antonio stood with the killing weapon in his hand, jaws clenched, satisfaction filling his eyes.
Vampires and humans cannot coexist. It's either us or them,
Antonio muttered. Ciaran glanced at Antonio, measured.
You're a vampire hunter? That's why your name was on their blood list?
Yes, and I've never had a kill this big, thanks to you. I think I like your weapons.
Antonio grinned.
Does Emily know about your unjustifiably biased worldview?
Unjustified?
All species are equal. Your sister said as much earlier.
Equal my ass. These bloodsuckers killed 2 of my journalist friends. Who knows how many others they have killed?
Antonio snarled.
Did they provoke the creatures?
I don't care. These guys had families. For those left behind, it isn't fair however you put it.
I don't support the killing of creatures unless it is absolutely necessary. If you pull that stunt on me again, I'll make sure I give you to the vampires. I rescued you. I can always take you back. I am sure Madeline would understand.
They heard footsteps from across the road, not just a few, so many. They could feel the ground shake with the movements of what was coming at them.
They saw your signal. Well done, Antonio.
The group of vampires stopped from across the road, looking at them menacingly. A sea of vampires. The vampires looked at the entrance of the tower, where silver dust was still pumping out in waves.
Just how many silver bombs do you have?
Antonio asked, swallowing hard.
1, and you just blew it.
How do we get out of here?
There is a dimensional gateway. They are standing in front of it.
Ciaran deadpanned.
Chapter 15.
The pitiful hole you call an office is too small for me to fit in. Why don't you all step outside?
Dr. Costa said, pointing his gun at the corridor in front of the office. Dr. Costa didn't look like a doctor at all, Madeline thought. Sleazy basket case, she scolded on the inside. The cowboy outfit was totally out of place. She was sure the furred vest he was wearing was made of polar bear skin. Hands up, Adam walked out, followed by Madeline and Emily. Dr. Costa took a step back away from the group. Madeline glanced around. The station was extremely quiet. All staff had disappeared, moved to the North Pole, turned into penguins, turned into vampires. Surely it couldn't be that fast. Reading her thoughts, Dr. Costa said,
I'll just clean 'em up. A quick experiment. No pain, though. I gave them some tea, and they all walked into the chamber for me to distill. See, I'm quite humane when it comes to test subjects. When we sink this station, they'll all be dead anyway. I don't want to waste any samples.
Samples to do what? Madeline asked, disgusted, but keeping him talking.
Making super soldiers,
Emily spit out and earned a slap across the face. The slap was so hard it sent her falling backward onto the steel rail.
We don't sink this station or anything in Antarctica for that matter,
Adam growled. Dr. Costa clucked his tongue.
You've gotten too attached to this station, Adam. You steal mineral. You're a thief. Don't forget that.
Adam glared at Ivan. The doctor sneered and said,
Don't upset me, or I'll tell Isabel, and you won't get your retirement money.
He looked down at Emily, who was still sitting on the floor.
And you disappoint me. You won't get a penny. Isabel will manage the station. I am sure she wouldn't let you sink it,
Adam said. The doctor chuckled.
You think the vampire bitch knows anything? She thinks she's important, but she's only a pawn. I'm the one in charge, you dumbass. Now I need you to control the bloody drill, Adam, so behave.
He glanced at the 2 women.
I don't need these bitches, so I'll clean 'em up with the rest of the staff.
His lips curved into a grin so evil, Emily shivered.
What would you prefer? Tea or coffee? I'll call Isabel,
Adam said, desperate, saying anything. The mad doctor thrust the gun at Adam's forehead and said softly,
Try it. See if she can help you. Thing is, I'm paid to kill her and take the object after she retrieves it using her exceptional vampire skills.
and I'm paid by the same person who paid her. Get the picture? She is only a sacrificial lamb, or sacrificial vampire, to be precise."
Costa let out a short laugh that made his face crooked, as if he was in pain.
"Now, if you want to live, stay here."
The doctor turned to Madeline and Emily.
"Tea or coffee?"
he asked again, and Madeline flew at him. She had her Yudki on, so Costa stood no chance fighting her. A rain of punches and kicks flew at him. Soon he turned into a pile of bloody meat. He crawled along the corridor, begging her not to kill him. She looked at him with disgust. He curled up on the floor as if in pain. Then he pulled out a small gun tucked inside his polar bear jacket and was on his feet in an instant. But before he could pull the trigger, Emily flew at him with her knife, piercing it deep into his chest. The gun fell from his stunned fingers. He slumped to the ground, grimacing in pain, drawing in his last breaths in harsh rasps.
"Months of hard work, Emily. I'm sorry to let you know I've got the talisman you were looking for inside the chamber."
He sucked in a gurgling breath and grinned. The grin stayed on his face as his dead eyes glazed over. "No, no, no!" Emily punched at his chest, but he was already dead. She knew they had little time. She stood up and darted toward the back corridor. Madeline and Adam were right behind her. Chapter 16. Ciaran and Antonio stared at the sea of vampires blocking their gateway back to the other, safer dimension.
"Are you sure that is the only way out?" "There is no time for rhetorical questions, Antonio. I can pass these vampires easily by myself, but I can't take you." "Then go," Antonio said, looking at the menacing vampires. "I don't have a habit of leaving my men behind." Suddenly, the front line of the vampire moved and split. From behind them walked the formidable vampire that Ciaran had clashed swords with a few nights ago. "Good to see you again,"
Ciaran said. The vampire looked over Ciaran's shoulder to the rubble behind him.
"It seems you've wiped out my tower."
"I thought it was Isabel's tower,"
Ciaran said.
"She's a mayor of the city, isn't she?"
The vampire smiled, but his eyes were hard.
"She used to be. I am taking it over. Effective now. Whatever the equivalent time it is in your dimension. Then again, I don't know which dimension you live in."
Ciaran smiled equally as hard.
"You seem very knowledgeable and open-minded for a very old vampire."
"The first part is right,"
the other said, lifting an eyebrow.
"I like learning, but I am not open-minded."
His face grew tight with suppressed anger.
"I am now in charge of this city, and you've just killed my citizens. What would you do if you were in my position?"
"Your people held me against my will. I was just trying to get back to my world. What happened in there was an accident."
"You are a vampire hunter."
He glanced at Antonio and back to Ciaran.
"And you have an arsenal of anti-vampire weapons on your body. How can I believe what happened in there was an accident?"
The crowd of vampires rumbled when they heard the word hunter. They looked as if they wanted to charge.
"I'm the hunter,"
Antonio said.
"He's not. Let him go."
The new mayor of Vampire City smiled.
"So you're not a coward. I don't regret saving you."
"What are you talking about?"
Antonio growled.
"The child at the market, Michael Martina. I paid him to alert you that your head was on the kill list."
The men were silent, taking in this surprising news.
"It was almost too late," Ciaran said. "A vampire had nearly killed him when we arrived."
"I know,"
the elder vampire said and sighed.
"I apologize. But you got there in time.
So I owed you that one, Ciaran. That's why I didn't kill you at the bunker."
"Why'd you want to save me?" Antonio asked, still trying to understand.
"Personal reasons," the vampire shrugged. "Also for personal reasons. I won't kill you now, Antonio, but I can't let Ciaran go."
Ciaran arched an eyebrow.
"Me? Against an entire city? Is that how you lead?"
The vampire's nostrils flared.
"No,"
he said tightly.
"We haven't finished our sword fight. If you beat me one-on-one, I'll let you go. To be fair, use your supernatural power, whatever it is. I don't use my vampire power against humans." "Later," Ciaran said. "I have something urgent to see to. I will come back to fight you once I'm finished." "No, I don't trust you or anyone. Want to leave? Beat me." The vampire pulled his sword. "Antonio, stand aside. I can't guarantee your life against an accident."
Ciaran pulled his king's sword and swung it to stretch out in full length. He and the vampire circled each other, eyeing and measuring. The city of vampires surrounded them, watching. Chapter 17. Emily clawed at the gigantic steel door of the distiller. Tears streamed down her face. She looked at the security patch on the lock. Then she peeked into a small window. Inside the massive distiller, bodies of all the staff in the station had started to disintegrate. Then she cried again.
"Do you know the passcode?"
she asked Adam.
"If you don't know, how would I?"
"The staff are beyond being saved," Madeline said gently. "What is the talisman, Emily?" Emily said nothing. She gathered whatever she could and whacked at the door. She tried to smack the window. Nothing worked. She pulled over a laptop and plugged cords into the security patch. Madeline had seen Ciaran do this before. She knew what Emily was trying to do, without success. But when it came to decoding any lock or program, Madeline knew who the best in the cosmos was for that. When the computer didn't work, Emily cried nonstop. Madeline tried to help, but she had to ensure she was helping the right people.
"Who is the talisman for, Emily?"
She said nothing and kept trying new codes in the computer, tears streaming down her face.
"If the talisman is for the man you love, clawing at the computer and crying isn't going to help."
When she had done everything she could on the computer, Emily flopped to the floor and wailed. Madeline looked into the distiller. On the floor was a small steel box which was starting to catch fire. "I know who could help open this door," she said to the other woman. "But I will only ask if you tell me what this talisman is for."
"I can't tell you. You'll kill him. People will kill him if they know this secret."
"I'm not anti-creature, Emily," Madeline told her sharply. "If you want me to save him, I need to know I'm saving the right person. A good person. Is he a vampire?" Emily nodded. Tears streamed down her face.
"Please help him. I need to get the talisman out."
"Is he a good person?"
Yes, I promise."
Madeline narrowed her eyes. "You're lying to me, Emily."
"No, please. He didn't have a choice to do what he did."
"What did he do?"
"No, please, don't ask. If you need to kill someone in his place, then take me. But please help me open the door."
Madeline saw herself and the devastated woman in front of her. Not long ago, it was her in the begging position for Ciaran. Nobody asked her whether Ciaran was a good man, because at that moment, she would have done whatever it took to save him. Whatever it cost. Whatever the world thought of her, she didn't care. She just wanted to save him. Madeline stared at the lock and then engaged her wrist unit. She wasn't sure if the communication worked this way, but she had to try. She triggered her wrist unit and used verbal command. Connect to Ciaran. The small screen came to life. The operation signals were working. She waited. Chapter 18. The last clash of the sword sent both Ciaran and the vampire backward. The vampire was strong. Ciaran skidded several feet before he could plant them and regain his stance. The vampire took it hard as well. He was still on the ground and couldn't regain his stance. It looked as if Ciaran was winning. The vampire slumped totally to the ground and turned even paler, if it was at all possible for a vampire. He was in his 30s. By Ciaran's gauge, he was a good soldier. Ciaran would like to recruit the vampire to be his commander, if he survived this. Either way. The vampire didn't look as if he could get up. He dropped his weapon.
This isn't right,
Ciaran thought.
Kill me,
the vampire said.
Well, you're already dead.
As he spoke the words, he felt his wrist unit signal Madeline's call. He looked at the screen and said,
Engage.
Madeline's face came onto the screen.
Are you okay, Ciaran?
Yes, things went as planned, but I'm quite busy at the moment.
He kept his eyes locked on the vampire. The vampire looked as if he was disintegrating.
I need your help, Ciaran. I need to decode a signals.
Where are you?
At the station. We found the station. We know what to do. But Emily must open the door of a distiller to take something out. It's locked. She needs codes.
Distiller? Is it going to explode when you open it?
I don't know.
Jesus Christ, Madeline. Get away from it.
Emily's voice came across.
It's not going to work, is it? You're not going to help us, are you?
I need more information than that, Emily. I have the entire city of vampires watching me at the moment. So if you want me to ignore the ocean of vampires here and help you on some sort of door, you really need to give me absolutely outstanding reason.
Vampire City?
She interrupted him.
You're there? Please tell Alex. I'm sorry. Please tell him I love him.
I don't know which one is your Alex.
From the corner of his eye, he saw the vampire's head perked up. He couldn't move, but he looked at Ciaran. Ciaran shook his head.
You've got to be kidding me. Is that Emily?
Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily's voice pierced through Ciaran's unit.
Alex! Is that you? Let me see him. Please, Ciaran.
Ciaran approached Alex and tilted his screen so Emily could see. Alex was on the ground and was fading away by the second.
I'm sorry, Alex. The talisman is burning in the distiller. I can't take it out. I'm sorry.
That's all right,
Alex said weakly.
Don't cry, Emily. I knew this day was coming.
Ciaran cursed on the inside. Alex was weakened because his talisman was burned, not because he beat the hell out of the vampire. Setting his ego aside, Ciaran asked,
What kind of lock is it, Emily?
Madeline came on the screen.
This might violate our codes of ethics, Ciaran. Emily wouldn't tell me what Alex did.
Ciaran shook his head. Rules, regulation, code of honor. All the things he used to rule his universe. He could only save worthy men. Those were the rules of Eudays. But here he was in the city of vampires.
Alex, what did you do to end up with a talisman on your head?
Ciaran asked.
I was an assassin.
Ciaran nodded.
But I don't kill humans,
the dying vampire explained.
In the last job, Emily was in the same place with those I had to kill. That's how I met her. I couldn't do it.
I was in a breach of contract, and that talisman is held against me."
Who was the client?
Alex grimaced and drew in a breath.
Hoyt Flanagan.
He could hear Madeline gasp. Hoyt Flanagan, his all-time #1 enemy, the most notorious, sadistic, gruesome sorcerer of all time. The man who made Satan appear like an apprentice. Ciaran looked at Emily's anxious face in the small screen of his unit.
Emily, I need a visual of the lock. Have you plugged all the cords into the right places?
Yes.
All right, just do what I say. This isn't a complicated lock.
Chapter 19. Emily was on the floor, typing in the last code Ciaran had read for her. She followed the instructions religiously. Madeline smiled on the inside. She was glad Ciaran had broken the rule to help them. It wasn't the first time he had done so. She was proud of him. They took several steps backward, letting the pressure in the distiller come down before opening the door. If she hadn't grabbed at Emily, she would have jumped right into the distiller to grab the box. That woman was so in love, Madeline thought, and absently rubbed her thumb on her wedding ring. Eventually, they retrieved the box from the distiller. Emily had pulled the talisman out, rubbed it in her hands, and slid it into her pocket protectively. Before they could celebrate, they heard the noise as a door opened and footsteps. They peered down from the top platform and could see Isabel and 10 vampires walking in. "It's time, Adam," Isabel called out. "Where are you?"
It's way too early,
Adam whispered to Madeline. He signaled. They sneaked into the side door to a small compartment. Madeline whispered into her wrist unit.
Ciaran, Isabel is here with 10 vampires.
Can you hold them until I have the shield delivered?
She bit her lip.
How long will you need?
A few hours.
I'll see what I can do. Bye for now.
Madeline,
Yes, Ciaran.
I love you.
The feeling of his love washed over her.
Then come back to me safely.
She disengaged her wrist unit before she teared up, then pushed at the door to see if it was secure. Outside they could hear the footsteps of vampires and Isabel's heels stomping on the metal platforms. "You don't want to play hide-and-seek with me. I am not a patient woman," Isabel said. "Dr. Costa's dead," a vampire's voice echoed along the cold steel corridor. "Oh, is that so? I'm devastated," Isabel's throaty voice sang. "All right, if they've killed the good doctor, then something has happened here that didn't go as planned. Have you found Adam?" "No, Isabel." "Who reported the 2 bitches stirring some trouble here?" "It was me, Isabel." "Oh, aren't you a good boy? Where did you say they were heading?" "Upper compartment." "Good." Footsteps stomped everywhere, so close that Madeline didn't care for it. She could jump out and fight those vampires, but Adam and Emily couldn't. And she didn't think she could protect them, fight, and also prevent Isabel from taking the key at the same time. Absently, she withdrew deeper inside the compartment, her back pressed so hard against the steel it started to hurt. She wondered what Ciaran was doing, and she absently rubbed her thumb on her wedding ring again. She could see Emily was rubbing her hand against the talisman. She turned it around and clutched it tight in her hand. It was as if her life depended on it. Her life did depend on it. In the last hour, there were many times she thought Emily would jump over the rail and land on the ground floor head first. "Damn, love!" She rubbed at her wedding ring again. The entire steel wall behind them began to lift open. Madeline, Emily, and Adam lost balance, falling outside. They lay on the cold steel corridor and looked up at the endless legs of the most beautiful vampire she had ever seen. She knew it was the one they called Isabel. Chapter 20. Ciaran had crossed back to the dimension where Antarctica was. Alex had recovered quite swiftly after Emily retrieved the talisman from the distiller. Now Alex and Antonio followed Ciaran to help. They still eyed each other, and Antonio still growled at the old vampire whenever he could. In the middle of the snowfield, Ciaran was sure Antonio's human eyes couldn't see much.
This is the crossover point between Antarctica and the Vampire City dimensions,
Ciaran explained.
I have ordered a shield to be delivered here. Once I have placed the shield, Madeline and Emily can take the Virgo key without the designated consequences.
A signal arrived at Ciaran's wrist unit.
It's here,
he muttered, and engaged the communication. They saw a flash in the sky, and a teleport opened in magnificent blue and white light. Inside, a round-shaped divide that looked like a gigantic cylinder appeared. The light circled, glowed, and vanished. On the ground was a 2-story tall, shiny steel column.
"Stay here,"
Ciaran said, and approached the cylinder. He flipped open a panel on the surface and typed in commands. A monotone robotic voice came across, asking for verification. He pressed his left palm on the square glass panel. The computer greeted him.
Verified. Ciaran LeBlanc, King of Udays. Mission HGY 1245.234. Time 24.23.658 XR. Weapon number IKH.126.KLO.23. Status: activate on command. Task: extermination.
Ciaran hadn't realized that Alex had stood next to him and peeked through his side to see the screen.
"What does extermination mean?"
Alex asked.
"Check the dictionary, Alex," Ciaran growled. "Get out of my screen."
A compartment door popped open. A text command appeared.
Insert key stone.
Ciaran quickly pulled the power stone he stole in Isabel's office out of his pocket and dropped it into the compartment. He slammed the door closed. Alex saw the stone and recognized it.
"That's our power stone. What are you doing with it?"
He pushed Ciaran away and grabbed the door. He hissed and withdrew it as his hand burned.
"It's silver, not steel, Alex,"
Ciaran said. Alex drew his sword.
"What is a silver bomb of this size doing at the cross-dimensional zone between Antarctica and the Vampire City?"
Ciaran drew his sword.
"We can only keep one, and I chose to keep the humans." "I can't let that happen," Alex growled. "Consider I have just saved your life by getting you outside Vampire City. You have talent, and you can contribute." "Bullshit," Alex interrupted. "That city is my destiny. It's my home. It's populated with innocent vampires. What do you have in Antarctica? Polar bears?" "It's not just the ice. With the scale of the explosion when the Virgo key is retrieved, it will sink not only the Antarctica, but will drown the Earth. You love a human. You should understand I can't let that happen." "No, I don't. No species is more important than others."
Alex charged at Ciaran, pointing the sword at Ciaran's throat. Ciaran didn't block it, so the pointy tip of the sword cut into his skin. He heard Antonio swear.
"It's not your life, or my life. It's not even the lives of the women we love that matter. When you're in charge of many lives, many families, generations of lives, what you've got is reduced to nothing," Ciaran said. "Fuck you, Ciaran."
Alex withdrew the sword. Then he slashed the sword at the silver bomb. Apart from the clashing sound when metal hit metal, he had gotten nothing. He then went on a slashing rampage at the innocent snow. Minutes later, he flopped on the cold snow, exhausted. A trail of a bloody tear ran down his face.
"There has to be another way, Ciaran," Antonio said. "Really? That came from a vampire hunter like you? Didn't you just trigger the bomb that massacred everyone in the tower?"
But they were gangster, Antonio protested. I never seen the city. There were women and children in the city. They were just like people, like us. They have family. It was like the entire innocent society in there. You think you can pull the trigger on that?
You think I don't know that? Ciaran snarled at Antonio. You think I need you to tell me how to govern? Do you think I haven't pulled a trigger that killed anyone? It takes a life to save a life. So pick the one you want to save.
Chapter 21. The vampires dragged Adam and Emily by the legs along the steel corridor. Madeline had jumped up to her feet. A vampire darted her way and reached his hand out to grab her. She swung her sword. The vampire's body became a few loose pieces dropping on the floor. Isabel waved her hand absently and followed the vampire who had Adam. Madeline jumped right in front of the vampire and slashed at him, taking him down. She grabbed at Adam. Isabel flew over and kicked Madeline away. Madeline lost her balance and fell over the rail, dangling on the outside. Isabel smirked. She approached to finish the job. Madeline looked down to the ground floor. It was 3 stories below her from her current position, so it wouldn't be a sweet landing. She swung her legs up and got up onto the platform before Isabel could do more damage. Seeing Madeline had gotten back up, Isabel turned around and grabbed Adam by the neck.
One wrong move from you, and I'll rip his throat off.
So what? Madeline sneered. That would be for the best, because you can't drill. His death will save a lot of people, and he will be a hero.
Do you like the sound of that, Adam? Being a hero? Isabel asked. Adam shook his head. I wouldn't think so, Isabel muttered. She dragged Adam with her toward the control room. Madeline darted toward the vampire, holding Emily, and swung her sword. With similar result to the one before, she killed the vampire, freeing Emily just before her neck was ripped open. When they both ran to the control room, it was locked from the inside, and Adam was operating the drill. From outside the glass panel, Madeline called to Adam.
You don't want to do this. You know the consequences. Please don't.
Adam ignored Madeline and started operating the drill. A clanking noise dragged along the ceilings. Gigantic wall panels opened, revealing 3 drill tooth. Each was as big as a 2-story building. To Madeline's horror, the drill started spinning. Other vampires saw the women trying to distract Adam and darted toward the platform.
They're mine,
Madeline said dryly. She jumped across the platform and charged toward 3 vampires at once. In a short moment, it was hard to tell which body part belonged to which vampire. There were no vampires left but one. Isabel was nowhere to be found. Madeline rushed back to the control room and saw Emily stacking explosives at the window for Adam to see.
I am going to blow up that window, Emily exclaimed. I'll drag him out here and make him stop the drill.
Madeline nodded. But before Emily could finish, Isabel flew over, grabbing Emily and flinging her over the rail. Madeline darted over, grabbing Emily's hand as she dangled from the high platform. Isabel approached with a menacing smile on her face. Madeline swung Emily back onto the platform and charged at the evil vampire queen. The 2 women fought as the drill went down past the floor of the station and hit ice. The ground cracked and the building shook. Isabel kicked Madeline, falling to the floor. She was about to charge at Madeline again to finish the kill, but she quickly glanced down to the floor below and saw the drill had hit the ground. Isabel left Madeline and flew along the corridor, racing down.
They have never operated that drill at this level before. It's obvious the drill and the building are not built for this, Emily cried out.
Madeline looked down to the floor and saw the crack spreading wide. She looked back up at the window of the control room and saw Adam smiling at her. Captain goes down with a ship, Madeline muttered. Bloody hell, Adam. Isabel had made it to the ground floor and was lurking around the ice hole. Madeline shook her head.
Adam wants to crash the entire station onto the key, so nobody can take it, Madeline muttered. I think Isabel will go down under and take the key before the building crashes, Emily said. I'll go down to make sure Isabel takes nothing. You get out of the building.
Emily shook her head.
I'll go down with you.
No, Madeline said quickly. You can't fight Isabel.
Emily nodded. All right, then.
She looked at Madeline, her eyes brimming.
Good luck,
she said, and ran from the building. Madeline went down to the ground floor and glanced at the wrist unit. Ciaran still hadn't called. Chapter 22. Ciaran grabbed at his wrist unit. He wanted to call Madeline. He needed her badly. They just had to nail this one. Fix the bomb. Made the decision. It took a life to save a life. His father had said so. Before he took over the realm, his father had said he didn't need to be virtuous. He only needed to be a just king. Was he just? God damn it, he was biased toward Earth. He came from here, and it used to be his home. It still was. That he could justify. Now he was biased toward Vampire City. God damn it. Was he just a king? It was his duty to serve Eudace. To act in Eudace's best interest. That universe was the reason he was born. How could he betray that? His hands shook. He looked at Alex, who had stopped interfering with his thought process. Alex just stood and stared.
Fuck you, Alex,
he said. He knew Madeline needed him to act fast. He looked at Antonio, who was sitting on the snow, not knowing what to do. He looked again at the bomb. He stared at the control panel for a brief moment. He held his breath and typed in the command. The cylinder spun immediately, as if it was waiting for his touch. It spun. It clicked. It roared in joy. A row of gigantic claws extended from the machine. It grabbed at the ice. It drilled down. Then it shot into the air and exploded into nothingness. Alex glanced around. In the cross-dimensional zone, he expected to see Vampire City drowned in silver dust. But it was as if nothing had happened. The citizens of Vampire City looked at him. They expected a lot from him. They knew what was going on, and at the moment, they were expecting true death. Women, children, families. They looked at Alex. He turned and looked at Ciaran and saw that Ciaran didn't return his gaze. In the cross-dimensional zone, Antonio expected to see Antarctica sink, but the lump of ice was still stubbornly standing. Ciaran stood by himself, staring into nothingness.
What did you do?
Alex asked.
Nothing you need to know. It is important that you understand. I have combined the dimensional zone of the Antarctica and your Vampire City. They are now one. They will share the same destiny. If the ice sinks, your city sinks. Now it is your duty to protect both.
Ciaran looked at his hands. They still shook, but he hoped his father would understand from somewhere in heaven. He only needed to be a just king, and this was the only fair choice. It would be unjust of him to choose to sacrifice either Earth or Vampire City. He engaged his wrist unit to call Madeline. He stared at the blank screen for a short moment. Then he looked at Antonio and Alex.
Trouble.
With a heavy heart, he darted at the direction of the station, guided by the signal from Madeline's unit. Chapter 23. Under the frigid water, Madeline swam toward Isabel. There was no way in hell she'd let that horrible woman retrieve the key. It was deep and dark, and it was cold, so very cold. Her silver blood was on and was running in full swing, but her teeth still wanted to chatter. She looked up toward the dim light of the ice at the surface. She knew the building was going down at any moment.
She stared in the dark water. The 3 teeth of the drill had punctured the ocean bed. The surface had been broken, and Madeline could see the gigantic hole the drill had created. In the dim light, she could barely see a magnificent ice statue of a goddess, holding the Virgo key in her hand. Isabel had reached it and dove into the hole. Madeline followed. Isabel grabbed at the key and broke the ice around the hand of the statue. Madeline attacked Isabel with the sword to distract her. Isabel countered the attack and quickly kicked Madeline's sword away. Madeline rolled on the ocean bed. She saw her wrist unit flash, signaling that it was safe to retrieve the key now. She looked around and couldn't find her sword. She swam toward the hole again. Isabel had gotten the key off the statue, crushing the ice statue into pieces. Madeline swam over and was kicked, rolling away again. From a dark corner, Emily appeared with Madeline's sword in her hand. She attacked Isabel, slashing wildly at her. Isabel withdrew into the hole, and Madeline swam over, grabbing the key as Isabel fought off Emily. Madeline yanked the key from Isabel's hand. She felt a tremor all around her and looked up, seeing the building falling down on them. She swam out, or tried to. Isabel grabbed at her leg, and Madeline kicked her back into the hole, but couldn't shake the other woman off. Emily charged at Isabel and pushed with all her might. Darkness descended, and Madeline swam backwards just outside the growing shadow of the plunging building. When she turned, Emily wasn't behind her. Madeline frantically returned and saw the 2 women continuing to fight. To her horror, she saw Isabel's sword pierce through Emily's body. Madeline swam over to grab Emily, pulling her away. She turned, needing to get out from under the descending building, but stopped when she felt a tug at her hand. Isabel's eyes were wide as she grabbed at Madeline. To Madeline's surprise, Isabel pressed the talisman into her hand. That's when Madeline saw the fatal wound. Isabel may have pierced Emily with the sword, but Emily must have pierced her first. Blood swirled into the water as Isabel's eyes glazed, and she stared into the nothingness of the dark. Frantic, Madeline pushed Emily out of the way, just before the building crushed down to the ocean bed, burying the dead woman. Struggling to the surface, she grabbed both Emily and the talisman, heaving in great breaths of air when she made it to the top. She looked around, hoping to find help. To her right, she saw Ciaran, Alex, and Antonio charging toward them. Ciaran pulled her out of the water, clutching her to him. His body vibrated with emotions, and he stroked her arms, doing anything to warm her. He just held her. He didn't say much. After a few moments, Madeline opened her hand and saw the engraved initials H.F. Hoyt Flanagan. What did he do to deserve these women? Madeline thought to herself. Madeline closed her eyes and held on to Ciaran. She knew she would do the same as Isabel had for the man she loved. The difference was, she loved the right man. Isabel didn't. From nearby, Madeline heard a sob. She looked over and saw Alex holding Emily in his arms, rocking. Another victim of Hoyt Flanagan's. Another beautiful woman dead. Or maybe not. Madeline felt him listening for life, praying for life, begging for his love to wake up. But his undead body couldn't tell the difference. Madeline's own eyes filled with tears as she saw a single blood tear trailing down Alex's face. Crushing her to his chest, Alex whispered something to Emily's lifeless body. It was as if time had stood still. Then Emily's eyes fluttered and opened, just the tiniest bit. Alex looked as if he were delirious.
Emily, would you like me to make you a vampire?
The question sounded like he was begging for an agreement.
Please, Emily, I need you to say yes.
She said nothing,
but her eyes flicked to Antonio. Antonio held her hand, tears spilling down his face.
I want you alive, Emily,
her brother told her, his voice clogged with emotion.
I don't care in whatever form. I don't care if you're a vampire, werewolf, or whatever. I just want you, sister.
Emily looked at Alex.
Yes,
she whispered. And just like that, Alex picked her up and darted toward the ice hills. Antonio covered his face and openly cried. Ciaran took Madeline's hand and rubbed his thumb at her wedding ring, saying nothing. She showed him the Virgo key.
"Mission accomplished,"
she said, her teeth still chattering a bit. He smiled and nodded, pulling her close.
"What's wrong, Ciaran?"
she asked in concern, placing a hand on the side of his face. He sighed.
I decided to keep both Earth and Vampire City. As the result, I had to collapse a dimension in new days and let go of Elixix. That's more than 50,000 citizens in 50 years. I know that it is in the future, and we still have time to fix it, but the idea that I was willing to sacrifice that many citizens for a city I don't even know eats at me.
She looked at his intense gray eyes and grabbed a fistful of his raven black hair, pulling him down and ravishing his lips. Chapter 24. Ciaran and Madeline were ready to go home. Ciaran turned to open the teleport when Madeline heard children cry. Not just any children. Her children. It was her children who were crying. She whirled around and saw nothing but white snow. Then she noticed that the sound came from her wrist unit. She looked at it, and then looked at her husband.
"Ciaran, you programmed a baby monitor device into my wrist unit?"
He grinned.
I thought you wanted it.
"You refused when I asked you to program my American accent into the computer, saying that you didn't have the time. Now you have the time to program a baby whaler into my unit?"
He hugged her to his chest and kissed her forehead before taking her hand.
Let's just go home,
he said, grinning.
I'll take the baby whaler off your unit.
She snatched her hand away and protectively covered the device on her arm. She looked up at him. "No, I want it now. I've changed my mind." His grin grew wider.
Are you sure?
She nodded and stepped closer to him.